All right, everyone. Good morning. Welcome to the replay of this discussion we're going to have about, navigating memory palaces. There's a number of ways to do it, and there are ways that are more powerful than others. And if you've ever wondered how to navigate through your memory palaces, then that's what we're going to talk about. There's an opportunity on the live stream to ask your questions. If you're joining us now, hit the thumbs up. Post in the chat, let me know where you are in the world, what you're doing, what you're thinking, and we'll have a great session about this topic of navigating memory palaces. Because one of the number one problems that people have is that they don't really understand that you don't have to see memory palaces in your mind. You don't have to create a picture of them in your mind, and if you're getting slowed down, then I think you'll find it very empowering to understand that memory champions who are competing, they don't have time to see memory palaces in their mind. They don't navigate them necessarily visually in the way that you would think. And so if you know more about the different ways to navigate memory palaces, then you'll be able to improve your practice. So if you're joining us, hit that thumbs up. Let me know where you are in the chat, that you actually can hear me. We're still experimenting with different setups, and so apologize for some of the disruptions with all of that, but the only way that we get to try new things, as with memory practice and using memory palaces, is by making sure that we are able to try new things. So, I apologize. Last week there was a bit of a disruption. Jack is here. Hi, Jack. Thanks for saying hello. Juan says the volume is too low. All right, we'll see if we can figure that out. But in the meantime, you could perhaps turn your volume up on your device or whatever, and I'll see what I can do about that volume now. But Jack is here, and Juan, thanks for saying hello, and I really appreciate that. If you are joining us, again, hit that thumbs up. Let me know where you are in the world, what you're doing and what you're thinking, and how things are going with your memory palace navigation. How much time are you putting into practice, and what are the results that you're getting? Are you using a memory journal? Are you drawing your memory palaces? If you're watching the replay, you can always chat your answers in the discussion below. And if you're watching the replay, also hit that thumbs up. And by the way, thanks, Jack, for noticing the lower third. We are also experimenting with different lower thirds, trying to find a balance. We don't want them to be distracting, but we also want to communicate one very, very important thing, which is that if you haven't taken my free course, then you haven't fully unlocked the power of these live streams, and you haven't fully really understood as much about the memory palace as you possibly could. So go to magneticmerrymethod.com/YT in order to take advantage of that. You get free PDFs, you get 4 free videos, walks you through what I would call correct memory palace creation and construction, because the navigation issue really comes down to, are you creating them in the first place? And again, I would remind you that it's not about seeing memory palaces in your mind, although that is a strategy, but it's not the most advanced strategy out there, and you can skip to the head of the game and when you understand these things. So Chalk is here, says hi. Cindy's here, hi. And the volume isn't very loud. I'm not sure why the volume is not that loud. Let's move the microphone closer. Does that help? I'll try and talk a bit louder as well. Not sure what we can do about volume right now. It's showing that it's spiking pretty hard, but thanks for your feedback on that. Shock, I don't know how to exactly turn the volume up, but let me do some experiments here. Thanks for letting me know. Connor's here. Hi, Connor. Thanks for saying hello. Obviously, volume issues are a replay killer, so if you're watching the replay, apologies for that. But one of the things we do is clear our throat at the beginning anyway, as people show up. And we'll just, you can scrub forward, and we'll see if we can make the microphone a little bit louder. So if I do this, is that making it louder? Let me know in the chat if that's a bit better. And I'm hoping that this should be getting louder and louder and louder. Apologies for that again. But that is maybe going to help. All right. I'm not exactly a technical literate guy, but here's the thing. I keep trying, keep showing up to the art and the craft and the science of messing around with these technologies, learning, making mistakes, of course. Everything is about mistakes. A lot of people fear making mistakes, so if you missed my video on making mistakes, please go and watch that. We released that. Some really interesting discussions there will help you make a super memory in your mind. And by the way, if you like cups, you can support this show by getting a Magnetic Memory Method cup at magneticmemorymethod.com/swag. I will send you a free video that shows you how to use memory palaces in a way that will really take your game to the next level. And nobody does these things, and they're very powerful. And I can say that without bragging because it's true. And it's not about bragging. It's just a very special technique that's completely new. And Maricella's here. Maricella, I happen to know, or has told me, that she grabbed one of these cups. And let me see if I can do some fancy stuff with the technology here and show you. There's Barry with his cup. And if Barry's joining us today, that's awesome. And, I like to use mine for my memory palace, my mind map drawing materials, colors, and so forth. And speaking of mind mapping stuff, we've got a review coming up pretty soon of Mind Map Mastery by Tony Buzan. I've written it all and really dived deep into this book, this technique, and so forth. And incidentally, I also spoke the other day, you may have seen the previous live stream with Phil Chambers, who wrote How to Train Your Memory, and that is something special that's coming for you all. And, while we're just waiting for a few more people to show up, I read this book, In on the Kill Taker by Joe Gross, about the Fugazi album. And it was a great memory exercise to read. I love reading about bands that I've loved all my life. I love reading about their music. And this is a cool song-by-song walkthrough of this album. And it just opened up so much memory. Really an amazing thing to experience an album song by song and think about all the memories, all the memory palaces that are related to those songs. Just thinking as a brain exercise where I would have heard those songs, memories that came up, even cars that I owned, which can be very good memory palaces for small sets of information and so forth. Maricella says in the chat, I have my cup and t-shirt already this weekend. I will use the cup tomorrow in my job office. That's awesome. Oh, you got a shirt as well? Awesome. Thanks for supporting the show, Maricella. And thanks for being a great participant in the Magnetic Memory Method world. You have many great things that you're doing, and I always appreciate hearing from you. And it's great that you grabbed one of these because, well, we see a picture of you with it, and then that video gets unlocked, and you're going to have a great brain exercise and a great memory palace training exercise that takes things to the next level when you do it, and makes your memory super. So grab one of those at magneticmemorymethod.com/swag. Let's see. Woo! There's that memory palace again. Isn't that neat? I like these new toys when they're working. If you're just joining us, let me know where you are in the world in the chat. Hit the thumbs up. And if you have any questions about memory palace navigation and so forth, pop them in the chat. That's what this is all about. It's hanging out. And if you have any questions about memory in general, that's what this is all about. And we'll get here to the different ways that you can navigate a memory palace. And there may be more than 5, but I think there are at least 5 core ones, and we'll go through them. And I just would reassert that people who haven't taken the free course should go to magneticmemorymethod.com/YT. If there's any concern you have about giving your email to a guy like me, Don't be. You're going to get free videos, free PDFs, and so forth. I know that email can be overwhelming and so forth, but we respect each and every individual who entrusts us with that, and this education will help you improve your memory very, very quickly. All you need to do in order for that to happen is actually apply the techniques, and then the adventure just begins. This is for mature learners who like to go on mental adventures that make learning faster and easier and more fun and have a super memory. And that's just what it's all about. So go to magneticmemorymethod.com/YT if you haven't already to claim that material, and it'll do you well. Just dive in and follow the recommendations. Now, the first way to navigate a memory palace is Birdseye View, right? And Birdseye View you might think of as third person, right? Omniscience. You can see through roofs, through ceilings, or however you want to say it, and you're looking down into the floor plan. Kind of like I've got on the screen here. Can you see that? Let me know in the chat if you're actually seeing what is over here on there. I wish I could actually reach in and point into it, but yeah, we could maybe get the mouse going for that. But at the end of the day, you're looking down. That's third person omniscient bird's eye view. And that is one way of doing it. And one of the things that is so important is understanding that you don't have to see memory palaces, but if you're struggling with this kind of mental rotation, this kind of visualization, then what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to actually, well, you're going to want to do this anyway, right? Whether you're struggling with it or not. Think of it, I only have in the last year really kind of understood the extent to which mind maps and memory palaces are essentially the same thing. I keep exploring it, and they're very different. On the one hand, paradoxically, they're different, but on the same side of things, they are the same. Nea is saying, can't hear you. Is anybody else having this problem? Let me know in the chat. Sometimes if you just refresh the screen, come back, that can help. But if you're having audio problems, if everyone's having audio problems, please let me know. Is everyone having audio issues or just Neha? Let me know in the chat how things are sounding for you and what you can see. Jack says he can hear me clearly. So, and if I remember correctly, Jack is probably up late, but thanks for being here. In the area you're in, which is the UK, I believe. Thanks for letting me know. And again, if you're having audio issues, video issues, sometimes just refreshing is good. I've been doing a lot of research into this technology and so forth, and it's very complicated. It's very miraculous that we can do it at all. And it's really, really interesting. A lot of the issues have to do with the strength of your internet connection. So moving closer to a router, or router, as you might pronounce it, can help. And I know that turning up the volume can be a risky proposition if you're on mobile, because what if someone rings you or you get a notification, it hurts your ears and so forth. But that is one of the risks one takes from having all their contact consolidated into mobile. I try to stay off mobile as much as possible, experimenting recently with the Instagram thing. So if you want to follow me on Instagram, not using it a whole bunch. I really don't need to be washed over with tons of images from random strangers, but at the same time, why not for a while? Give it a try. So I have been giving it a try. It's pretty fun, fascinating, and you can follow me there as well if you want. And actually, I don't have a link set up for that, but I'm sure Google is your friend. Put my name in there and you'll find it. Cindy says, fine as sound is fine now. Nea says, think it's just me. Sorry, Nea. Let me know if you can refresh. And so on. Anyway, looking like the drawing of the memory palace is very similar to the mind map. Like you can create mind maps mentally, purely mentally. It's not actually that difficult, but at the same time, you're not going to get the benefits of it. And so make sure that you are prepared for the big review that I'm going to be making of this book coming out soon. I'm not sure exactly when I'm going to release it. I was talking with Phil Chambers the other day, and I was thinking of maybe doing a big back-to-school special with 4 book reviews in a row in September, but we'll see how that goes. But in any case, you're not going to be mind mapping if you don't use it on paper. And to a certain extent, for many people, not all people, they're never going to learn memory palaces if they don't get them out on paper. It's just not going to be possible. And I think that for me, the big breakthrough was when I started to draw them, because it was too much. It was too difficult to. I was getting great results, but I wasn't getting the results. I couldn't figure it out. Why are these people talking about these fantastic amounts of information that they're able to memorize? Why are they going so quickly with their memory palaces and the things that they're doing in competition? Why? And why is it not happening for me? And I thought about it, and I thought about it, and I thought about it. And at one point, I just thought, I'm going to draw this sucker out. I'm going to figure it out. And that's when I unpacked all of the principles and the rules that have made the magnetic memory method so successful for so many thousands of people. And it's just simply because the amount of cognitive load that a memory palace can take for some people is reduced to the absolute minimum when you draw it out and you begin to be able to chart out your journey and use it strategically and relieve the pressure of having to think about that navigation in the mind. So you're doing a third person omniscient bird's eye view of a floor plan and you're figuring it out, right? This is phenomenal for reducing the work, quote unquote work, that the brain has to do. It's also phenomenal for helping you strategize the best possible journey through every single memory palace. Should take about 2 to 5 minutes after that to make an amazing memory palace that you can just dive into and use very, very quickly because of this process. So Juan says, I often have to memorize thousands of diseases, weird names, and symptoms. What can I do to improve my memorization techniques? Sometimes I take too many memory palaces and I run out of ideas and images. Okay, well, one, that's great. Thank you for that question. And thousands of diseases, of course, is a challenge, but it's doable, one disease at a time, right? The number doesn't matter. Don't get caught up in the number. There was Larry was his name. He was like, also in medicine, he was just like, zillions of facts. How do you do this with zillions of facts? Well, whether it's thousands, hundreds, dozens, it's one at a time, right? No one learns information except for one piece of information at a time. So try not to get hung up on the numbers. That's the first thing. And then really create goals. So how many can you do this week, right? And how many memory palaces is that going to take? Very, very, very simple strategy, right? So if you say, I can do 100 this week, then build or create the memory palaces to support that amount. That's really simple. Now, the other thing too is you got to understand the compound value here. You don't have to reuse memory palaces by cleaning them. You don't have to always be creating new memory palaces, although I suggest that you always be creating memory palaces so that you're unlocking your spatial memory, you're continuing to exercise your spatial memory, you're experiencing the vast realm of memory that's in your brain, which is space itself. What is your brain except for chemicals existing in space, right? That's all it is. So unlock all of that continually so that you never run out of memory palaces. But one, when you have 10 diseases in memory and you have them in, say, one memory palace, then you have an option to go in and compound, add new diseases to the existing diseases that you've already memorized, because there'll be relationships amongst the diseases, right? It's very, very exciting to do. It's very exciting to do. In terms of running out of ideas and images, well, one thing to do so that you never run out of ideas is just keep practicing. Keep practicing. Ideas create new ideas. Northrop Frye, who was a great poet critic in Canada, he said that poems come from other poems, right? And what does he mean? Well, if you want to be a world-class poet, the way to continue to create poems is to read poems. Stephen King, in On Writing, says that he just laughs at people who want to write novels who don't read novels. Like, you're just killing yourself if you have fantasies about dreaming of writing good novels if you're not a reader of novels, right? And like a consistent, constant one. Same thing with coming up with mnemonic examples like crazy. I have developed a certain speed of it. That's because I'm constantly doing it. And so you would do it too. You're not going to run out of ideas if you continue to be in the involvement of creating ideas. Also, you don't have to just be creating mnemonic ideas. Like, I often am creating ideas about lots of things. Speaking of Stephen King, I'm writing short stories right now, and I'm reviving an older habit of writing fiction that I let go for a long time. So to create constant ideas, I know scientifically, mathematically that, if my brain is like a little bit compressed and it's like not coming that easy, the number one way to keep it going and flowing and easy is just to keep going, even when you don't feel like it, even when, it's like, oh man, I'm not having the greatest time right now. Just keep on going. Just write garbage. Memorize things that you don't even, necessarily enjoy. Like, I don't always enjoy a deck of cards, but I pick up a deck of cards almost every single day in order to keep the ideas coming, to keep the connections coming, to keep the conjunction with spatial memory going. I don't always feel like learning Chinese, but I expose myself to Chinese. I make mnemonics for Chinese every single day. And yeah, sometimes it's like, oh my goodness, what the heck am I going to come up with for that? But I just come up with something to keep the ideas flowing. Because it's like the Tin Man in The Wizard of Oz. If you're not constantly moving, you're going to get rusty. And then if you cry with frustration because it's hard, well, then those tears are going to rust you, right? So you just keep going. You have a bit of attitude, fighter pilot attitude, as I like to think about it. You just get in your jet. There's things to be done. Let's go, 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 go. Fire, 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 fire. It doesn't matter if you're going to hit the target or not. You just keep going and going and going because you're much more likely to hit something if you're firing those guns. All guns blazing, okay? So I hope that helps you out, Juan. Let me know if you have further questions about that in the chat. If you're joining us now, hit the thumbs up. Let me know in the chat where you are in the world, what you're doing, what you're thinking, and if you, like Juan, have very good questions. And even if you have questions that you don't feel are good, ask them anyway. Sometimes I will just point you off to a resource for self-study, but this is here for you to ask those questions and to have that self-study unlocked for you. So Maricella says, I am reading the German vocabulary book, 2nd edition, just starting with memory palaces. It's very interesting. Awesome, Maricella. And thanks for grabbing that book. You got the enhanced edition of the German vocabulary book. If you're watching this and you'd like a link to the enhanced German vocabulary book, let me know in the discussion now so I can go back and look later or have somebody do that, or by email, and we'll get you that link to the enhanced German vocabulary edition. Maricella, I hope you will join the 30-day challenge. The link for doing that is there. There's just a wealth of mnemonic examples from other people who have gone through the 30-day German vocabulary challenge, including my own, and you're free to join that as someone who has that book. Even if you're not learning German, you might want to get it because it's a great opportunity to unlock some mental adventure for yourself and take a challenge and learn these techniques. It's a lot of fun, and I have a lot of fun taking these 30-day challenges myself. There's also a 30-day challenge for Chinese that we've done. We're going to do one in Spanish. We're going to do one in French. We're going to do one. I got a lot of life in me yet. We'll do it. We'll get it done. So if your language isn't represented there, I still recommend you go through the ones that do exist. Or just push me a little and say, we need one for this language, and maybe we can accelerate that. In any case, number 2, we've got the 3rd person view, right? Now there's also the 2nd person view navigation way of going through a memory palace. This, I think, is probably the weakest, but there's a way to strengthen it, and it is the 2nd person way of navigating a memory palace, and that's where you see yourself or a representative of yourself moving through a memory palace. And this doesn't have to be bird's eye view, but it can be. But it can be that you, let's say here's a camera and here's you, and you see yourself moving around, and that camera can be behind you, it can be to the side of you, and so forth. This causes a lot of cognitive load, a lot of cognitive overwhelm, but not for everybody. Some people really, really dig this. It really works for them. Others, it's just too much. and it's too much strain on the brain. It costs too much energy. I don't waste time on it because it doesn't do anything for me. But for people who do, it does do something. You know, this isn't a there. There are guidelines and there are principles and there are even rules that will set you free if you follow them. But you need to explore for yourself. This is not dogma. It is recommendations. So if you find this one enjoyable and pleasurable and it's getting you the outcome that you're looking for, awesome. Like a thumbs up to that. There's nothing that speaks against it. For many people, however, it will take too much mental energy. It'll slow you down and it will not be enjoyable as a result. And it will not get you the quick victories that open up the brain because you're getting these dopamine spikes. Wow, this is working. This is amazing. This is so much fun. I'm learning so much faster and remembering more because of these techniques. So it's up to you to find out, and you have to go on your own mental adventure to figure out where you fit on the spectrum. And here's the interesting thing. As you develop a mnemonic style, things may change over time. So you might want to remember these different navigation techniques because the more you know, the more you grow, right? The more you have to play with, the more you can move around and have better results, have more interesting experiences, and develop a stronger mnemonic style. So second person is something to think about. It's related to some kinds of video games, for example, where you have a vicarious experience, to use a big term. Um, Vicarious experience means that you're somehow seeing an external representation of something and feeling that it's happening to you. So, Super Mario, for example, you can just watch Mario, but you can also feel as if it's happening to you. So I remember playing Mario when I was a kid and jumping and being like this with the body. Whoa! And, reacting when you fall down a hole or when you get eaten by a plant from one of the pipes. It's like, right? This is kind of like a vicarious experience. Or when you're watching a movie and you're sitting there and you're thinking, oh wow, you can feel the kiss or you can feel the explosion. That's a vicarious experience. It's not you up there on the screen, and yet part of you is so involved in that it is you. And so one of the things you can do as a great memory exercise for memory techniques and brain exercise is to observe yourself watching movies and catch yourself in those moments where you're having a vicarious experience, either playing games, watching movies, reading novels, and so forth, and really study them. Study them and think about how you can transport those experiences into what you're doing with your memory palace work and practice. Because when you study yourself in moments of fantasy, in movies, novels, comics, whatever you like, video games, and you get a real good sense of what that experience is like, both directly and vicariously, you can transport that over to what you're doing in your memory work. So if that makes sense, give me a thumbs up. Let me know yes in the chat box, or if you have questions about that. And Juan says, thanks, Anthony. I'm from Salta, Argentina. All right. Thanks for letting me know where you're at, and really appreciate that. And I'm glad that that question helped you. If you have further questions, let me know. So anyway, for third person, second person, and those two techniques, yeah, they have their advantages. And can anybody guess in the chat what is the next technique? If we've got third person and we've got second person, what could possibly be coming next? I should have done it like this. Third person and second person. What could be coming next? Let me know in the chat. If you don't have a Superman cup, then I suggest you get one. And I'll teach you how that can be so powerful when you grab a Magnetic Memory Method cup by going to magneticmemorymethod.com/swag. That is a great link there that's showing up on the screen. Thank you to Ali for making this new lower third, magneticmemorymethod.com/swag, SWAG. That'll take you to the store, and you can grab that cup. And when you send a photo of yourself with that cup, then like Barry, you're going to get a free course. And wow, it's not a free course, it's a free video, but it's it's worth a whole course if you know the magnetic memory method and that you are engaged and you know how to create proper memory palaces. And to know how to create proper memory palaces, if you haven't taken it already, go to magneticmemorymethod.com/YT, and that will be your ticket to learning the ins and outs of it. All right, so no one has guessed what comes after third person and second person. What comes next? No one in the chat. Everybody asleep, or are you driving and mobile it isn't working? Well, interesting. That's the low level of interest in the next one. The low level of guessing. Radio silence. I'm shocked. I'm surprised. Let me see. Let me see if I put something in the chat. If that will do anything. No guesses. Frank Castle says Birdseye. Birdseye, I would put under third person. So we covered that one as our first one. But thank you, Frank, for chiming in. Really appreciate that. I always like to see if you guys are all awake out there. Maricella says, as a note, later I'll send the photo with the cup and t-shirt. I want to understand the reason why 5 ways to navigate your MP Live Hangout. I'm not sure what you mean, the reason why, Maricella, but if you reframe your question, then maybe there'll be an answer. But basically the reason why is that people who haven't taken this course may not realize the power of understanding the different navigation things, and we are here to encourage them to take that free course if they haven't already, or maybe take it again so that you understand. And there's no ninja hypnotic language in this. You're going to take the course and you're going to learn, and you're either going to implement or you're not going to implement based on the techniques, based on the principles of magnetic memory method learning philosophy, which is to take things one sip at a time, ideally in a good cup that's memorable, that helps exercise your memory. And that's going to be something that requires one sip at a time. Study the techniques, implement the techniques, and practice the techniques that improve your life. SIP, one sip at a time. So that's why we do this. And Rajat is here. Thanks, Rajat. How can we do a first person method? Well, first person is the next one, logically. So we got third person, we got second person, and then of course we have first person. Now, first person would be imagining yourself in the memory palace, walking one step at a time through a journey. And so if you see the memory palace on the screen now, you'd be, say, at station 1, and you would literally look at station 1 through your eyes, the eyes of your imagination, your mind's eye, and then you would walk to station 2. You would actually see the journey walking to station 2. And as you're walking there, it'd be like virtual reality journey, maybe. I'm reading Dawn of the New Everything right now, actually. Speaking of virtual reality, very interesting book. Yeah, so you would then walk there, and then you would walk there. Now, I really don't recommend this because it is such a lot of mental energy. Not necessary. But that is the third way that you can do this. And again, there's more than 5 ways, but we've got 3 now. So, Rajat, I hope that answers your question. You just simply do it by imagining through your own eyes in a memory palace. I think it's pretty weak, but at the same time, some people it's really effective for. So it doesn't matter what my opinion is, although I really don't know. I've never heard a memory competitor say that that is anything remotely like what they're doing in competition, although it might be part of it, but it's not the way to do it. There's no time for this. That's what a lot of people don't understand, is that the practice of using a memory palace is to limit the cognitive load and to speed up the process so it's going laser fast. And you don't have time for games like seeing through your eyes, because that requires you to visualize the actual memory palace and squeeze, oh, there's the corner, and now I'm going to walk over to the chair and all this sort of stuff. That's just like too much. It's too much, at least for me, but not for everybody. So when you know that you can do it, you can figure out for yourself and be your own best teacher, which is one of the goals of the magnetic memory method. And it's all constructed to make you the best teacher by educating you about the memory method and how that it works. And ultimately, what you want to work towards is something a little bit different than that, or at least I think most people will want to work towards that in order to not only remember more faster and with greater longevity using the memory palace, which is really better called location-based mnemonics. And that's really what we're working towards, you understanding with the magnetic memory method, is that this is about the ultimate memory technique of them all, and understanding that all memory techniques are spatial in nature. So not everybody, but I gets confused with linking and acronyms and like all the different things you can do with memory techniques. What's the difference between the journey room and the Roman room and the memory palace and the journey method? And what about just linking and so forth? And Harry Lorraine never talks about memory palaces and yada, yada, yada. If you get one thing, get this. They're all location-based mnemonics. It's just a matter of how good you use the location and how foundational your understanding of spatial memory is, and how you're using that as the powerful resource that it is when you understand that everything is taking place in space. Your brain is in space. The chemicals are in space. And the mapping, spatial mapping that's happening is happening regardless of whether you use memory palaces or not, because your brain is a memory palace. That's why the mind palace term I don't like and I don't really use, because it's not about your mind. It's about your memory as a space, as a palace, as a palatial location. And part of the palace is, is respecting St. Augustine's wonderful, wonderful use of language around that. But it is a palace because it's so regal. It's the path to being the king or the queen or whatever you may identify as of your mind, right? And it really is about memory, right? It's about memory more than it is about mind. So memory palace is the term I prefer, but you need to look deeper than that. You need to look deeper than the terminology. It's about space. It's about using space as a mnemonic, and all mnemonics use space. There is no mnemonic that does not use spatial arrangement, and there is no brain that does not encode in the neural networks without using space. It's all spatial. And when you get that, your practice is going to soar. It's going to be an incredible resource that it cannot be any other way until that you understand this. And this is what the memory champions know. This is what people knew thousands of years ago. They talked about it thousands of years ago. People read those books and they don't get that. They don't understand it. And you know what? I don't blame them, because it's a little bit obscure. If I didn't have PhD level training and 2 MAs, I probably wouldn't have picked it up either. But I just have been trained to read, to read a little bit deeper as a matter of habit and to perceive what's going on. And having a bit of training in some of those dead languages didn't hurt. So, but you would do well to go back and reread anything that you've read and understand that all memory techniques are located in space. All mnemonics use spatial memory. So Rajat says, you really should know that memory palace is very niche, so the number of people is not an issue. People take you with importance, but many people don't know about your method's name. The number is good. Well, thanks, Rajat. And yeah, I guess we can see that that way. One of the things is this is very grassroots. This is very much growing organically, and we really appreciate when you share these videos. We appreciate when you get involved in the discussion, when you let the robots know with your thumbs up and your comments that you appreciate this content, because that tells the robots to show it to other people. And yeah, the Memory Palace is very niche, and sure, if I started to use Mind Palace, then the robots would hear it more. But this is about the truth, and we care about the truth about memory, and we care about you finding out the truth about your memory. And that's not going to happen gaming the system just because. Now, the odd time I will use Mind Palace in the titles that I put out there, but I really don't think it's the best title. I don't think it's the title most closely aligned with the truth, because mind and memory are not the same thing. And that's just the way that that is. So, yeah, I mean, away we go. I don't know what else to say about that, but I appreciate your support. I appreciate all your thumbs up. If you haven't hit thumbs up, hit thumbs up. Let the robots know. Let me know as well. I appreciate every single one. But it's at the end of the day, you need to understand that so much of the blessing of the internet comes from real and legitimate truth-telling people, and so much of what is going to, that is endangering the internet right now is vanity metrics and people sharing things that they didn't even really look at, and just so many issues with things on the internet. We won't go into a speech about it now. Although, if you ever want to hear long speeches about it, let me know, because we can certainly make them. And it is important to the survival at the end of the day. Our behaviors online are going to dictate the power that we have over what the kind of internet that we have. So we need to be very careful around it, and we need to be very conscious of how we behave with the internet technology, because everything that's great about the internet is under threat right now, and people are trying to turn the internet into multiple internets instead of one. But there is no internet if you can't link freely across to everything, and that you can't share freely. So we all need to respect the privilege that is sharing, and that's not been happening very much up till now. We've been pigging out, and and we need to really bring some discernment to our activities if we want to preserve this great thing. So I really appreciate your thoughts on the Memory Palace being very niche, but at the same time, it's happening in everybody's head anyway, and we're looking for people who want to respect and uphold the tradition, and I will fight for the term Memory Palace over Mind Palace any day, because it resonates more closely with the truth, and that's that. And again, I may use, and I have used, the term Mind Palace here and there, but I think it's not really going to help people in the same way as explaining the difference between mind and memory, and fighting for that. Maricella says, image when we will be in a test. I hope it will be easier and very natural in me. By the way, repeat the third person, please. All right, well, third person is bird's eye view. It's looking from the top down, as if you could see through the roof and you could see all the objects. And then we talked about second person, seeing yourself externally. You can have a version of third person where you do both, where you look down through the roof and you see the top of your head or the top of a bridging figure's head and move that person around. That's third person, bird's eye view. And second person, of course, it would be exactly that, except for not necessarily seeing through the roof on a top-down view or an omniscient view. It would be a camera here. Here's you or your bridging figure, and the camera is either, somewhere like this, following that person around. A lot of cognitive load on those things for myself, and for many, many others. And the Magnetic Memory Method has helped release so much of that cognitive load for those who learn it and use it properly. And there are indeed proper ways to use it and improper ways. In the same way that writing sonnets, a sonnet is not a sonnet if that you're not following the rules and conditions of sonnets. But of course, over history, there are many, many people who have made sonnets and broken the rules of sonnets, and they're still sonnets, even though they broke the rules. But they were able to do it only because they understand the rules. Same thing with like modern art and so forth, and pushing the realms of representation. They only are successful, right? And their paintings only end up being worth millions of dollars that, some people just can't understand. But art critics and art collectors understand, because they understand the rules of the game, and they understand that those people are really breaking those rules. It's not just like, you go to the art gallery and you're like, I could do that, right? Well, the truth is you can't. Even if you could, you can't, because you're not in the context. You're not in the frame. You don't understand the rules, right? Same thing with memory palaces. If you want to refine your practice, You refine it on the understanding of the rules, and then, as Tony Buzan often says, the rules will set you free. Same thing with mind mapping and all these tools. There's deep thinking involved in it. There's deep, deep logic involved in it. And it comes from years and years of experience using these techniques, years of study of how other people use the techniques, and years of teaching it. Because quite frankly, if you don't teach these memory techniques, you never even see all of what you could be seeing as well, which is why I always encourage you to show other people what you've learned. And, but, do some of the stuff. Whoa, someone's crazy today. Sorry about that. It's not in our apartment. No crazy people here, except for once in a while when the moon. No, I'm kidding. But you want to really understand that when you explain to other people what you're doing and you're actually doing it and you get the results, then, it's like the second person. Here's your camera. Well, then the camera changes perspective and you see more and you see it from different angles. And then it unlocks the chemicals in your brain. And this is related to Rajat's question here about please tell us about reading deep. Well, I talk a lot about the art of memory, but there's another art, right? Art of memory is ars memorativa, and then there's ars combinatoria, which is the art of combination, combining ideas. And when you want to read deeply, you want to understand the art of combination. So reading deeply involves a lot of elements, and we talk about that in the Magnetic Memory Method Masterclass in a course called the Master Plan. And so you can read deeply, you can read quickly and deeply, you can read quickly and at a superficial level, you can also read slowly at a superficial level, or you can read magnetically, and that is reading deep and for a way generally quite quickly, but not always quickly, because reading quickly is not always your goal. Anyway, reading deep involves understanding the art of combination in addition to the art of memory, and that's all covered there. And then it involves actually reviewing what you've read because you've memorized what you've read, and that's very, very important. And reading deeply also means memorizing words and terms that people use and going and thinking about them, contemplating them, understanding the history and the origin of words and why authors use this word and not that word, and thinking about why they make those choices and what are they trying to explain, and re-envisioning in your mind using mental rotation and all the tools of mental rotation. And what ends up happening is when you memorize what you're reading, knowledge at a much deeper and more profound level emerges. And it's, I was talking with Lynn Kelly the other day about this. We were recording a graduation bonus video for a new project that we're doing, and really grateful that she did that. If you don't know Lynn Kelly, she wrote the memory code. You've got to read the memory code if you haven't. It's really brilliant. But the first thing she gets on the call is she's just so excited. I'm so excited. It's just the more I use memory palaces, the more I experience knowledge, was how she put it. And I'm just like, exactly. And in the magnetic memory method world, I call this rhizomatic knowledge. Why? Well, because so much of knowledge throughout history has involved this tree sort of metaphor, where the branches reach out to the sun and feed the roots underneath. Well, rhizomes and the rhizomatic learning is more about deep connections that have all kinds of directions, not just up and down like a tree to its roots, but bulbs of realization and understanding just emerging spontaneously because of the deep neural network connections that memory palace memory creates. When you're memorizing at that level, you're changing the neurochemical structure of your brain, and then you're making it possible for new ideas to emerge. This is a lot to do with something that Ezra Pound called the luminous detail. So Pound, in Imagism and other aspects of his poetry criticism, he talked about how when you have an ideogram here and then another ideogram here, depending on how you want to pronounce that word. I like ideogram and ideogram because both create different meanings. But if you have them and you juxtapose them, a third meaning will emerge that never emerges if you don't have them both juxtaposed in space. And that's very powerful. That luminous detail, I believe, comes from rhizomes, a rhizome structure in the brain, in neurochemistry. So that's how you read deeply. And you also keep reading. You read and you read and you read. And one of the things that you can do that that I love to do, and I find it to be one of the most important reading habits in the world, is as much as possible, when a book mentions another book, you read the other book as well. And it's infinite, so it's not entirely possible to do so, but you create deeper connections that way, not just in your knowledge on a superficial level, but deep in the structure of your brain, that creates these things, because you're creating connections. At the very least, look up things. So I just had a friend over here. I was showing him this book, In on the Kill Taker, song by song analysis, and I was like, you know what the best part of this book is, right? And he's like, no. And I said, it's every other book that it mentions, right? And so my goal is to read as many of those other books as it mentions, because it's going to start to create a deep neural network connection in my brain. And that's not only with the memory techniques, but it's also going to be even without the memory techniques. But it's going to be all the more so with the memory techniques, because of those deep neuronal connections that only happen when you memorize and you use recall rehearsal in order to really get it into long-term memory. And it's just that simple. It's really, really important to do that. So Rajat asked, learning transfer. I guess you could use that term, learning transfer. Let me know if that comes from a particular teacher of learning, or if it's one you created. I'm not sure. Well, I mean, transfer is an interesting idea as well, because one of the cool things that we can think about with memory and objects like books is that, and brains, one of the things that makes books and brains the same thing in many ways is that they're information and storage retrieval devices. Information storage and retrieval devices. And so what that means is that anything in which information can be stored and retrieved has a basic similarity for the transfer of knowledge, for the transfer of information, and for the reception of information. Now, that doesn't mean that a floppy disk understands what it has stored and makes retrievable, but it does mean that it is an information storage and retrieval device. Humans can store things that they don't understand, and they can pass them forward. This is one of the problems on the internet. People, they'll remember something that they haven't really, I saw this link, or I saw an article, I didn't really read it, didn't understand it, but it was in Time magazine or whatever. They're being mimetic. They're part of the meme structure. They're information storage and retrieval devices that then transfer that information. So one of the skills and things that we want to learn as learners is discernment and transferring information that is worth transferal, mentioning information that's worthy of transmission and referral, and having context to that. So to be fair, this is one that has more worth to transfer to you than this one. This one I'm just using as an example, not necessarily going to be the case that, you need to now go and get In on the Kill Taker to learn about a Fugazi album, right? You might want to, because this is very challenging, richly rewarding, intellectual punk rock music. I'm not sure you even call it punk rock, but, you're really missing out if you haven't heard Fugazi. But I don't know if you're going to like it. You might not perceive those things in that at all. And this book may not convince you. However, this book is a must. If you don't have this book, you're missing out. And I can tell you that with a 100% certainty. You will never know how to use a mind map nearly as well as if you just sit down and read this book and follow its rules. It's just that simple. And you can say it with 100% certainty. Same thing with the free course at magneticmemorymethod.com/YT. If you don't have it and you haven't gone in there and gone through it, we've been making some jokes the past few days. If you've been following along, I made a whole video about don't call me a guru. One of the first comments that comes through is, hey, the guru. And I laugh back and call him guru and so forth. But at the end of the day, you've got to become your own guru. And you do that by actually understanding these techniques and following through and learning and so forth. And that's what we're trying to do, is teach you into the best possible teacher of yourself. And you need, at some level, to learn. And then ideally, as an information storage and retrieval person, you will transfer on what you've heard after that you have actually learned it. become your own guru, become your own teacher, your own best person through action, through the actual use of the techniques, and then discern for yourself which elements should be passed on, which should be taught in which circumstances, and so on. This is a very, very important principle in all education. And, you know, I may have pedagogical philosophy going on here that doesn't suit the current era of dash and grab and, you know, collect all the links that you can and download everything under the sun and blah, blah, blah. But that's how the internet has stimulated the hunter-gatherer instincts in humanity. And, you know, just like with food, people used to just get real and fat and plump, and they were waiting for when they were going to starve in a feast or famine kind of world. And that made sense at a certain period in humanity. We do the same thing with knowledge these days. We go and we get fat and plump and we collect stuff and we save it for later, data for later, and so forth. This is not really good. You want to have more discernment and really invest in educational experiences that you're going to sit down and go through, pay them their due from beginning to end, and have a bit of patience with them as well. And you're going to get victory from some discipline that you bring to education. And so that's my speech about that. But Rajat says, learning transfer is when you take learning of one sort and generalize to other fields. I learned it from Elon Musk. Okay, that makes sense. He also talks about first principle thinking and advocates against reason by analogy. Yeah, I'm not sure I would advocate against reason by analogy, but I'll have to look into that more. I think that reason almost at some level always involves analogy. So I don't know what he's saying there, but I'll check that out. Thanks, Rajat. But learning transfer must have analogy involved, right? How can you generalize learning of one sort to another field without some kind of analogy? It doesn't really make any sense. It's by virtue of our ability to analogize that you could transfer one form of learning in one field to another. So please share a link with us if you have one to exactly where you heard that from Elon Musk, but I'm not sure that that's even possible to advocate against reason by analogy when learning transfer, as you've described it here, relies on analogy. It is analogizing. I can't see around that, a way around that. So Rajat says, I agree totally. Okay. We're on the same page, my friend. Awesome. Super duper. All right. So we've gone through 3 now. There's the 4th, right? Now, what do you think the 4th is? We got first person, second person, third person. Well, ultimately, there probably is no 4th person, although maybe if you were a ghost who died, you could be the 4th person in the 4th person. But I don't think that's. I don't think any of us have died. But in any case, what we can think about is how do we combine all of these together? How can you combine all of these things together? And a combination is ultimately what we want to think about. How do we combine first person, second person, and third person together in a way that the combination itself eliminates or reduces to its core essence the cognitive load, so that we're spending a minimum amount of mental energy and we're spending a minimum amount of time and getting them all together? And the answer to that is through practicing all the different kinds and figuring out how to fuse them for yourself. And there are multiple sort of paths to doing that. And I would recommend, if you are interested in that, you get the Magnetic Memory Method free kit at magneticmemorymethod.com/YT. But I want to pick up on a question here from Juan. Juan says, do you know how much is the new book going to cost? Can you let me know which new book you're referring to? That would help me answer that. So I'm not sure which new book you're referring to. But in terms of consolidating first person, second person, and third person, that's the 4th way. And it's a self-study kind of deal. You've got to practice it on your own. And the 5th way is the magnetic memory method. And it is it involves bringing all these three things together, plus some tools, the bridging figure tool and the pillar technique if you get to that level where you can do that. And you're going to try to create, also there's seashelling as a tool and technique. And then you're going to want to create ultimately a constellation. And that is what's going to enable you to have speed with zero overwhelm. And the constellation is really just using location-based mnemonics, spatial-based mnemonics, space as such. And you get that by drawing your memory palaces, creating a proper journey, seashelling wherever you possibly can, and using bridging figures whenever you possibly can, and depending on the nature of the information, the pillar technique, in order to maximize the speed of that journey and reduce the cognitive overload. So you don't have to see the memory palace at all, and all you're seeing is your magnetic imagery in the ways that you're using it. And even there, seeing isn't the right word, because you don't have to see anything at all. In my own practice, all the practice that I've really had exposure to by talking to dozens of memory competitors, this is not about seeing images in the mind. There's no time, but there is a visual aspect to it. It's one of the modes. And so you want to understand what visuality means for you, and you'll get that by practicing with these different tools. So that's that. And the sort of fifth navigational element that you can consider is all of these tools in virtual settings. And that would mean invented memory palaces that don't exist. And it would mean thinking about using novels, movies, video games, and so forth, where all of these conditions of first, second, third person, combinations of first, second, third person, are all going to come together into play. And you're going to want to know those things, and you're going to want to have some experience with them, because virtual memory palaces, above all, is really, for many people, but not all people, the most cognitively demanding approach. So you want to consider whether that's really something for you or not. But it's definitely going to be one that will require an amount of practice. Or if you want to start on that foundation, you can. I have some resources about virtual memory palaces on the Magnetic Memory Method podcast that you can listen to. And in the masterclass, I teach the most likely to work for most people approaches to that. So that's all available there. In any case, those are the 5 ways. And if you are with us now and you have any questions you want to pop into the chat, please do. I hope you enjoyed these 5 ways to navigate memory palaces. And I really appreciate all the time that we are able to share with one another. And maybe we'll dive into some mailbag before we go, to give you some time to see if you have any questions. I always like checking the mailbag, see what's going on. Rajat says, isn't cognitive load relative? Can you tell me if there's an optimal cognitive load that binds data better? I tried using link method, and since it is super fast and the memory palace takes time. So is cognitive load relative? Yeah, it will be relative. Everything has a certain amount of relativity, in the sense that you are you and I am I and so-and-so is so-and-so. So there is that relative nature to things. However, there's also the fact that every functioning human brain is pretty much the same. It's following the same rules, right, in terms of neurochemistry. So there's very little things that can be relative there. And we're not only talking about the neurochemistry, but we're talking about the actual physical nature of the brain in terms of structure. And we're also talking about things like the amount of blood sugar and rest and diet and so forth, all of which can be optimized pretty much in the same ways. But then there is the relative nature of your diet versus mine, which is why N=1 study is so important. And it's why understanding the rules is so important, because it's the things that are not relative that make the difference. not the things that are relative. So then, and then the other things that are not relative are that are really interesting to know about are things like practice, right? So everybody needs practice. That's not relative. However, the amount of practice is relative to each individual. So some people will get away with less practice than others, but no one gets away with no practice. It's just there's nothing there. So, one thing that you can do, Rijat, is understand that the link method is a memory palace already. It has so many fundamental characteristics to the memory palace. So if memory palaces as such are taking you too much time, then maybe you're just not thinking about the memory palace technique in as deep and as complete as a manner as you could be. And even if you still don't use the memory palace as such, understanding the memory palace in that new way may improve your practice with linking. Because what is a memory palace other than a series of links used in a particular way, right? And what is a link other than a bunch of things that you've encoded in space? Left, right, up, down, however you've structured that. It's all the same. It's all the same. So again, it's like finding those relative similarities and finding those differences and understanding them at the deepest possible level will make your practice very, very different than anyone else's, but it'll still be practice, and everybody pays their dues through practice. And the amount of the quality of your practice has a lot to do with some very, very simple things, which I call the SIP, which is study the techniques, implement the techniques, and practice the techniques with information that improves your life, right? SIP, study, implement, practice. It's very, very simple. If you want to reduce the amount of time you have to practice, follow those principles and do it consistently, and study the right techniques, the techniques that you really think are going to be the ones that help you. And of course, we're delighted and honored whenever the magnetic memory method is the choice for you. But we make no illusions that it's the only thing you should study. It is a portal of entry for some people, and for others, it's a destination. Some people call me the mechanic because I fix the problems in other memory trainings. For some people, there are no problems in those other memory trainings, and they're gone. The goal of every authentic memory teacher should be to sit you down and say, here's what I can help you do and get you out of there as soon as possible so that you are free from the ignorance of forgetting. And they should have a little thing, as I do, which says, here's where to get more help from other people. This is what the Magnetic Memory Method podcast is all about. And if you look at the history of the guests that are on the show, and you look at the blank spots, well, the people who aren't on the Magnetic Memory Method podcast are the ones who said no. And that's because they don't really have the same philosophy. They don't share the philosophy that you need to be constantly SIP, study these techniques, implement them, and practice with the information that improves your life. And I have been told no by people, and I've been told why, and it's because they just don't want to share these techniques in that way. And it's mind-blowing. It doesn't happen that often, but it's pretty mind-blowing. And many of the people who haven't been on the show, that's why. Weird. Because if this was a university, which is what I do my best to make the Magnetic Memory Method world, is a university, if I was teaching philosophy, I would not be sitting there saying, read Plato and Plato only. That's just very deeply anti-intellectual. And it's bad for all human beings for that to be that way. But you need to study lots and lots of teachers. And I've always admired the teachers who share as many teachers as they can, and been quite suspicious of those who are not open about expressing, look, there's a history here, there's an origin here, and there's many other players out there from which you can learn in different ways. So that, I hope, helps you. And I don't think the Memory Palace should take you more time than linking. I think that you just need to understand the Memory Palace better and understand it for what it is, which is a location-based mnemonic. And all mnemonics are location-based at the end of the day. And understanding that and working with that, contemplating it deeply as you practice, will be revolutionary for you. I'm confident it will. So Rajat says link method is not good if I have more than one list, so I need a palace. That again is that's relative to use your term relative. That's relative to what you're doing with link method and how you understand linking. So I would agree that ultimately at the end of the day, you you do need a memory palace because the memory palace is the only way to unlock the true spatial nature of all the other techniques, whether it's an acronym or whether it's a PEG system or whether it's PAO or whether it's this, that, or the other thing. It doesn't really matter. They're all spatial in nature. And the way to unlock the power of them is to treat them that way with the most powerful technique in the world, which is the memory palace. You can call it apartments with compartments if you don't like the term memory palace, which one of my most successful students at the age of 88 did. He's just like, I can't get into this memory palace term. I said, well, don't let it get you hung up. Call it whatever you like. And he thought about it and he came back and he was like, I'm going to call it apartments with compartments. Go nuts. Call it whatever you like. But at the end of the day, if you're not using that resource, you don't really understand the brain. You don't have to take my word for it. You don't. I'm just going to say it bluntly, though. If you don't use memory palaces, you're not understanding how the brain learns at the highest possible level. You're not understanding the memory tradition, and you're not involved. And you're not involved in it. You're just not part of it because all of this real lasting ability comes from understanding this essential part of it and understanding these different ways to navigate memory palaces that we've talked about today. And we just want to encourage all the people in the world to get this and to understand it. And one of the ways you do it is you draw your memory palaces if you're struggling to do it in your mind at the beginning. And even if you're not struggling to do it in your mind without drawing in the beginning, help your brain understand true and lasting magnetic memory by giving it its due, getting out a piece of paper. Forget the apps. Forget that you can draw on computers. Forget all that stuff. The brain hasn't caught up to technology enough yet for that to really work. And I mean, do it. Experiment with it if you like. But I strongly encourage you to be realistic and to understand that, yes, you can use software if you want. No one's saying don't use software if you don't want, but understand it in context with the other approaches. Give them both their due. Create multiple memory palaces in both, and you will see the difference. And, you'll either prove me wrong for you or you'll prove me right for you. And that's a beautiful thing either way. You need to see it for yourself. And again and again and again and again, when I work with private clients and they are insisting that they have to use an iPad or they have to use this or that drawing software or it has to be on the computer, I prove them wrong. Well, no, they prove them wrong, because if you just follow this advice, you're going to get better results. It is very difficult for it not to produce more results. It's usually because the person has decided that it's not going to work for them. And that cannot be changed. That is, stubbornness is something that only the individual can work with to change. And, well, I'm stubborn too, and I will stubbornly continue to preach the good news about the older tech, which is you're using more muscles. Your eyes are engaging with that material in a much different way than with screens. And yes, there is such a thing as paper fatigue, but it's not the same fatigue as screen fatigue. And we're all deeply screen fatigued. I'm screen fatigued. It's unbelievable the amount of pressure on the brain that never used to be there in learning. Now, aging could sort of play a part in this, but at the end of the day, the less time I spend on screens, the better my concentration and my focus and my memory. Down pat. And it's the same thing with cards. People say, oh, but I want to practice cards. I don't want to carry a deck of cards around. Well, go ahead and play with the apps, but also pay your diligence with the cards and see if there's a difference for you. I predict that there will be, but I don't need to be right about it. All I care about is the truth for you. And the way that you get to the truth is through SIP, one sip at a time. Study the techniques, implement the techniques, practice the techniques with information that improves your life. And, some people say, yeah, but why cards? How can that improve your life? Well, we can go on and on and on about how that can improve your life. But at the end of the day, there are certain amounts of information that you're juggling all at the same time that will help you juggle multiple amounts of information. Speaking of learning transfer, you're going to transfer this skill over to languages. So language is sound and meaning, right? And it's also duration and depth and volume. And this is a great way to practice that with things that you're already familiar with, but you're not familiar with memorizing multiple levels of information. And it's also a way of understanding spatial positioning better. It's also a better way of experiencing recency and primacy effect better and milking those effects for all that they're worth. And then seeing, oh, I need to be more concrete and so forth, and really learning and transferring that over there. Also, every single card can help you in your memory palaces, and every single card can help you with things like tones if you're using a tonal language. And there's just, I mean, there's not an end. I want to say there's an endless amount of ways that this can help you. There actually isn't an endless amount, I don't think, but the potential is endless, because the more you practice cards, the more revelations that you have. You're just sitting there focusing and you're learning, and you're like, there's just so many realizations that come every time I sit with cards. I just have some kind of realization, even if the realization is, this is so powerful. This is such a great thing. I'm so glad that I sat down to practice cards again, right? Because practice is where everything happens. Practice is where you get the slight edge. Consistent practice is where you get the compounding of the slight edge. And if you're not practicing, if you're not showing up, and you need a simple way to do it, this is portable. This is placeable in your path, and it doesn't get lost inside of a device. I don't even have a device here to lift to raise as an example, because I try to keep the iPhone away from me as much as possible. But this is, something that you can have on you at any time and just go, oh, Ace of Hearts. Well, what is Ace of Hearts? Oh, it's Michael Jackson. Why? Because this is 81, and he was played by Weird Al in Michael Jackson's, or in Fat, instead of Bad, right? And then you go to the next card and you think, oh, okay, so this, and then, you come up with what that is, and you come up with the image, and away you go, right? And then you go to the next one. By the way, this is Mike Tyson in a boxing match, and I used to have it as a match, like an actual generic match. That doesn't really work as well as, well, actually, he's now got boxing gloves that are made out of matches in a boxing match, and that has made my practice so much better because of that realization. Now this is the Toad from the Warner Brothers, and now this is Condoleezza Rice, right? And there's a reason why it's Rice, and every time I'm doing this, I'm practicing. And speaking of revelations, when I realized that this was not as strong as it was, that's a revelation as it could be. That's a revelation that comes from continual practice. That wouldn't have come any other way. It's just that beautiful. So keep showing up to it. And the same thing with language. Same thing with numbers. Same thing with anything. It's very, very powerful to keep continuing and practicing. So Juan is asking, memory mind map. I don't know what that is, but if you mean this book, Mind Map Mastery, this cost $26.99, which was Australian, I believe. Canadian, it says here, $21.95, UK $14.99. US $19.95. Worth every penny, and I highly recommend that you go and get it. I don't recall what this cost, and it doesn't have a price on it, but worth every penny. Your memory improvement library is worth every penny, so go and get it. So Maricella says Memory Palace must be taught in schools also. Yes, indeed, they must be. They must always be taught, but not by schools, by the adults. I mean, yeah, they should be taught in schools, but who's going to get them taught in schools? Parents. So learn them for yourself and go out and teach them. And maybe one day schools will, but the way that we get this started at a grassroots level is to not rely on schools to do it. It's very easy to throw around this statement, this should be taught in schools, this should be taught in schools. We need to make it taught in schools. And my focus is on adults and making sure they understand that. I really, I disfavor the idea of hoisting these techniques on children when the parents haven't covered them themselves, even if it's only just a little bit, so that they're able to demonstrate and show to the children exactly why this is so important and powerful, and then even have their kids teaching it at schools. So there's a lot of adults that go to schools and they do memory stunts and they amaze the kids as if it's magic and that sort of stuff. But why not be the adult who demonstrates to the kid and inspires the kid to pick these techniques up, and then go with your child to the school and do a demonstration together so that the kids can relate to it, that they can see that it's possible for them instead of adults showing off. I think that's what I have to say about that. Evan says, sometimes I get anxious about finding memory palaces to use. How can I get comfortable using a location as a memory palace that I haven't visited in a long time? Evan's great question. Dive in. And about anxiousness, go and watch the video that I have on the channel about getting courage and overcoming fear. It's the previous video, and you'll find that very useful. Let me see if I can just pull up the link for you. Kind of curious if that's possible, and I'll put it in the chat. But great question. It's called Conquering Fear when using advanced memory techniques. And I'm going to see.
Do you have a problem?
Oh, there I am. I'm going to see if I can get that in the chat for you. Because feeling anxious is not anything that you need to have, but you can conquer it. And I'm going to put that in the chat for you. Feeling anxious. Whoa, we got a lag here. Well, try this. Watch this video. And I suggest everybody bookmark that video, get it open in a new tab, and watch it after this presentation. Because the fear and anxiousness that people feel is good. It's a sign that you're on to something powerful. But there's options. And so I talk about Feynman technique, but it's more like the magnetic Feynman technique, because I don't think it goes far enough. I don't think people teach it as deeply as that they should. Evans says, okay, thanks. Thank you, Evans. Please check it out. And leave a comment below. There's actually some really interesting discussion elements in that discussion there, and I would love to hear from all of you who are watching now, because sometimes we have fears about these things and anxiety around them that we might not want to admit, but it's totally normal and natural. And one of the things you can do is just admit it and then move past it. Move past it because you've been able to acknowledge it, and then dive in, because you're going to be your best teacher. Barry's here. Hey, Barry. Good to see you. Thanks for saying hello. Barry says, I recently supported a friend of mine in building a memory palace to remember her essential oils. She used her cousin as a bridging character who loves oils herself, and it worked great. That's awesome, Barry. I love that people, they can use their family, cousins, and so forth. And you just made me think, I don't use my cousins nearly enough. I got 8 of them. So at least I think there's 8. There might be more. But I just don't use them nearly enough. I don't even know enough of them, which is kind of sad. But the ones that I do know should be using them. That's a great suggestion. I'm glad you raised it today. I think my cousin Russ, for example, he'd be a great one. So thank you for that, Barry. I really appreciate it. And I really appreciate you supporting your friend in that way. And it's one of the great things. It does things for your mind, is to just pay forward what it is you've learned and help another person. And, now it's working great for herself. And away you go. So awesome. Thumbs up to that. And everybody hit that thumbs up if you haven't already. Let me know in the chat where you are in the world, what you're doing. And Rajat says, what is a bridging character? Well, this is a tool that you will learn about. If you haven't joined the free course, please do. You'll have the opportunity to learn about bridging figures. You could call them bridging characters if you want. I call them bridging figures because they're not necessarily always characters. They don't have to be people. But it's a sort of an advanced next level thing for people who are on the email list, which you get by going to magneticmerrymethod.com/YT, and we'd love to see you there. And speaking of opportunities to get cool stuff, a cool video you can get when you get a Magnetic Memory Method cup, go to magneticmerrymethod.com/swag, SWAG, and that when I see the image of you, it's since Barry's here, let's have a image of Barry with his cup. Then you get a free video designed to help take your Memory Palace practice to the next level. And that video, if you use it, will be very powerful and will make your memory super indeed. And you might want to get one of these to complement it. And you see, Barry, I am still rebuilding my memory palace technique for this, and continue to do so despite my wife's chagrin. And Rajat, here's a little hint for you: bridging figure. I laugh wickedly, but I don't mean to laugh wickedly. It's a secret that only makes sense if you've taken the free course anyway. So that's at magneticmemorymethod.com/YT, and you can always get hooked up directly for this at magneticmemorymethod.com/swag. All right, so just a quick review, and then we're out of here because it's lunchtime. But the 5 ways that you want to do this: third person, bird's eye view, looking down. Second person is sort of with a camera looking at you, or your bridging figure. In that case, you could do it. Then first person would be through your eyes as you're navigating the memory palace. Then the fourth thing is, 4.1 is self-study, figuring out how to consolidate all these into one. 4.2 is using the magnetic memory method to develop seashelling, to develop bridging figures, to develop the ability to use the pillar technique and so forth. And then the 5th one would be all of these things in virtual memory palaces. Phil, who wrote How to Train Your Memory, and we were joking on a recording we made recently. It's like, well, wait a second, this virtual memory palace thing, all memory palaces are virtual at some level. But by the same token, some are less virtual than others. Some are more real. And that has to do with the neurochemistry and the neural networks that you've created in your brain. So my number one tip for you really is, if you want to move towards consolidating all these things and get to the magnetic memory method constellation approach to everything, then you're going to want to draw the memory palaces. It's like the number one thing to do. If you haven't drawn them for a while, then come back to that practice. And if you are still drawing them, draw them better. And, I would just encourage people to think deeper about mind maps, because mind maps are very closely related to memory palaces and can be even more closely related to memory palaces. And so if you haven't had a chance to read Mind Map Mastery, there's going to be some material coming out from me very soon to convince you to the best of my abilities to not only benefit from it, even if you don't read it, but to get it so you can benefit in the most highest possible way. Because part of the philosophy here is that you understand all these techniques. So if you haven't come to and you're able to really see them in context by understanding multiple approaches. So if you haven't been to magneticmemorymethod.com recently, there are some new resources there for you with last week's show on the Magnetic Memory Method podcast. And we had a great time. There was an interesting faux pas, but interesting discussion about that faux pas. I asked some people, and people were like, yeah, leave it. And we still are waiting for a revelation on the second inverse Easter egg there. But I will pop down in the chat for you the link, because it goes deep into memorizing numbers, and I'd love for you all to have it. So, Memorize Numbers podcast. And that link is there for you in the chat, right there. So I hope that you'll go and give that a listen, and it's another way to get subscribed to the free course and be notified of all the things that are up and coming. And in the meantime, draw memory palaces. If you don't know how to do that, then, go to magneticmemorymethod.com/YT. Thanks, everybody, for being here today. As always, a great privilege and pleasure and honor to hang out with mature learners interested in the memory tradition and in the magnetic memory method take and teaching about the memory tradition. This is a wonderful, wonderful way of using your brain at the highest possible level and going on great mental adventures that unlock the power, the vast space, and the power in that space in your mind, so you can learn faster and remember more. And indeed, remember as much as you want, because it's always in your power. And it is very, very interesting. Rajat says, I have used command system, but what if you have complex ideas? I have a hardship linking them. Rajat, send me an email. I don't know what the command system is. I'll remember to look it up. Cobra Commander is coming to mind as an image to help me remember that. Just above the screen here to use a memory palace. Maricella says, thanks for your time. I enjoy this afternoon with all together. Thank you, Maricella, for being here. Really, really appreciate it. And thanks, Evans, for that super chat that just came in. I really, really appreciate that. And your question, well, we got to take a little bit more time if we're getting super chats. Really appreciate that, Evans. You know, I really do appreciate that. But most of that money actually goes to YouTube. So if you want to really support, grab a cup at magneticmemoryMethod.com/YT. And we gave you a free video for that. But I'm going to spend a little bit more time here, even though my wife is waiting. She's being patiently quiet. But we have lunch planned here. But memorizing abstract concepts, to thank you for that, Evans. Well, let me catch up with a few last chats. Rajat says, thank you. Cindy says, thanks for your video. Your advice has been very helpful. You've inspired me to improve on all levels. To learn and remember, I want to read your other books that your and other books you've recommended. Well, thank you, Cindy, for being here. Thanks for saying hello. And to thank Evans for that gift. Abstract concepts. Okay, so the first thing, Evans, it's not your bad. It's not your bad. But I think I put down in the chat, in the description for this video, and if nobody saw it, yeah, I say, and instead of leaving a super chat, why not grab something from the Magnetic Memory Method store? And I just would point out, I mean, I don't have a problem supporting YouTube. Do you guys understand? Or have you ever thought about how much it costs them to host all these videos? So it's not like I'm saying don't support YouTube with super chats, but by all means, it's just a great thing to do. But by the same token, you know, whatever. Everybody pick their battle. We appreciate support one way or the other. But I just will quickly say this, since you're here, and about abstract concepts. There is nothing so abstract that I can think of that can't be described in words. So if you can tell me the abstract concept that you're working with, then I can demonstrate to you what it is that I would use to memorize that concept. And it's just a matter of thinking, what is it that I can use to describe in words that I can translate into magnetic imagery and then weave that together with space in a memory palace. And so let's take something like that I memorized back in the day, aletheia. Okay, aletheia is a Greek word, ancient Greek word. I don't know if they still use it in modern Greek or not, but aletheia means truth, but it's more powerful than that. And truth is an abstract concept, but even more abstract is that the truth is unhiding and unhiddenness and an act of unhiding. And truth, I mean, it's kind of like that word guru. Guru doesn't mean teacher. It means anything that casts light and dispels ignorance, right? And so it's related to this idea of unhiding something through the application of light, right? And so that's very abstract. It's abstract. But at the same time, imagine Weird Al hanging himself with a tie on the top of a pyramid that's casting light onto the sword of truth, right? And it's just all of a sudden, as abstract as that is, it's very concrete. Because Al, right? Weird Al, tie, aletheia, I didn't really need anything for the ya sound. And then I knew from reading another book that the Egyptians used to believe that they saw the world because their eyes shot light into the world, right? So that's why a pyramid didn't have to be a pyramid, but I was just linking one thing I already knew with another thing. This is all in a memory palace. And so I'm memorizing the sound and the meaning of the word at the same time, and all the abstract meanings, right? And Heidegger used to use this word a lot. So it's in a memory palace with just a bunch of stuff about Heidegger, right? It's that easy. So whenever you think something is abstract, refuse to call it abstract and just give it some concrete words. And I don't know if Alataya is the best example for you, but for me, it's a very good one because it's the way that I managed to turn that abstract concept into an instant memory and memorize it. So I hope that gives you that basis to explore for yourself how that might work. But I just simply don't think that there's anything so abstract that you couldn't turn into words. Barry says, Richard Feynman, the scientist, would agree with you, Anthony, about the ability to describe any complex topic and capture it with concrete words. Yes, and Feynman's a good example. I mean, the previous video that I linked to in the chat here, I'm talking about the Feynman technique. I've made it a bit more magnetic, but Feynman is a great guy to study if you want to be inspired and have ideas about how to make anything complex very, very concrete. Regit says, this is linking so you link it with other abstract ideas or similar meaning or sound. Yeah, I would just say that the ultimate link is that this is all taking place in a memory palace, so you know where to find it, so that you can use recall rehearsal. Because if you don't have these things organized in a memory palace, you can't get it into long-term memory as quickly as you can otherwise. Yes, you could with linking get very fast with recall rehearsal, but I think you would use I've tried it and it just uses way too much cognitive energy. It's just not nearly as efficient, and it never will be, I don't think, even with oodles and oodles of practice, or at least I'm not willing to practice that much with it. When I got very good and fast to the degree that I needed with memory palace technique, and the associated techniques without having to spend all the time with information that is essentially in the void of my mind, when I can have it on firm foundations that are deeply already built through the autopilot nature of how the brain remembers space from the get-go. So that is why it's not linking. It is linking without being linking. It's so much more profound and powerful than that for most people. So if you want to have, and Rajette says, I want to have less load too, think more about the memory palace, practice the memory palace more, and you will find that there are very, very profound and deep experiences that you can have with spatial memory that you're not going to have if you just try to link. And what I described there, I was just like, yeah, and by the way, this is in a memory palace. And I didn't mean to brush off that it was in a memory palace. I remembered it by virtue of it being in a memory palace. It is precisely because it was with other information from studying Heidegger and his other terminology that he uses, German terminology, ancient Greek terminology, and so on, that it all was able to be transferred directly and quickly without friction into a memory palace while reading the book with some review after the book, and just be done with it, right? And even to this day, I graduated my PhD in 2009, April 2009, and I still can remember most of that stuff, which I would not be able to do, I can guarantee you, if I hadn't done it in this particular way. And it's not just the one technique, it's the combination of the techniques that brings it all together, because I've consolidated everything into a simple package. It's called the Magnetic Memory Method. And if you would love to be able to do that as well, we're not about competition level stuff. I've learned a lot from competitors. I've taken everything that is useful and valuable, and not just for me, but that I've seen work with other students, ideas from the competition world that I've seen actually help people when I suggested it by going deep into their projects with them. These things are in the Magnetic Memory Method, and some things that, are just maybe not for everybody, but I share them as well. But we're focused on large learning projects where you want to remember the information for the rest of your life. And the premise is, what can we do now that makes that happen? as quickly as possible, realistically, scientifically, and understanding the n=1 nature of science, which is that each person is the scientist in the laboratory of their own memory, and you run the experiments one step at a time. Study these techniques, implement these techniques, and practice them with the information that improves your life. So Evans, thanks again for that super chat. I really appreciate your support. If you want to if anybody here wants to get this cup and the free video that comes with it, go to magneticmerrymethod.com/swag and make sure you get the free course at magneticmerrymethod.com/YT. I'm off for lunch. Thanks, everybody. Feel very blessed and grateful to have spent this time together with you. Come visit me at magneticmemorymethod.com. And until we have a chance to speak again, much love from here to you, and keep yourself magnetic. Bye-bye.